You're listening to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast, brought to you by BuildTurbines.com. Learn, train, and be a part of the clean energy revolution. Visit BuildTurbines.com today. Now here's your hosts, Alan Hall, Joel Saxum, Phil Totaro, and Rosemary Barnes.
Welcome back to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Hall, in the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina. I have Rosemary Barnes in Australia, who has been doing a little bit of travel. Joel is back in Austin, Texas. Man, I feel like everybody's been traveling a lot, and so is Yolanda. Yolanda has been on the road quite a bit, and we have a really interesting week in wind energy, particularly over in Denmark and Norway. And if you've been following the news there, as we all know, Equinor had a pretty big investment into Ørsted several months ago, where they put in about $2.5 billion to buy 10% of Ørsted to help right the ship a little bit. And then basically last month, right? Joel, it was about last month where they spent about $1 billion for the rights issue to keep that stock moving, right? Orsted needed more cash, and that's how they raised it. That's a total investment of about $3.5 billion. That's a lot of money for anybody to be spending at this moment. And Equinor is thinking, this is a pretty good bet. That's great. And they want to work closer with Orsted. And the talk is that Equinor wants a board seat with Orsted. Joel, is there any chance that is going to happen?
Well, it's interesting that they brought that up as well, right? Because the initial buy-in, back, I think 6-9 months ago, whatever it was, they specifically said in their press release, we are not trying to get a board seat. We don't want to have control over this, yada, yada, yada. But then when the rights issue came out, and I think it was the Ørsted stock dropped like 30% or something that day. They threw more cash in. They got a little bit more power, but it's like anything, right? Once you've got quite a bit of money invested and you have a pretty heavy percentage of whatever that investment may be, it can be, half ownership in a car. I don't care. You want to have a little bit more say about what happens with your money and what the result can be based on strategic decisions. And if you've been watching Ørsted's decisions now, they've been at the whim of government policies and stuff for the last few years, but they've also misstepped a little bit on a couple of them. So you can see Equinor wanting to get in there to protect their investment a little bit. And the funny thing to me here, and Rosie, you spent a ton of time up in Denmark, is the back and forth between the Norwegians and the Danes about, oh, you're just our little brother, you're our distant cousin, da 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 da. How they were kind of all at one point in time a lot closer. There was what was called the Kalmar Union, I think it was. And that was the Danes, Norwegians, Swedes, all under one king. This was a long time ago. But so there's that area of the world's kind of all been playing together. And if you know a little bit of that history too, all of that money that Norway has, so all the money that Equinor has is ex-Danish land money. So the Danes gave away their rights to the North Sea to the Norwegians for whatever reason, and that's where all the oil was that made the Norwegians rich. That is the Equinor pile of cash.
People talk about that frequently, like really frequently in Denmark. I probably would have had a conversation at least once a month, maybe once a week about that topic. I remember one that sticks out in my mind is I always said that Norwegian, I love the Norwegian accent. It sounds like Danish, but they're laughing. And I remember saying that to my boss one time, my Danish boss, and he says, yeah, they are laughing. They're laughing all the way to the bank because they've got our oil. and every Danish person has a huge chip on their shoulder about it. It was like the oil reservoirs weren't well known. When they did the divide up of who would get, which bits of the ocean, it was mostly about fish. So they divided it where they divided it. Everyone was happy with it at the time. And then not so long afterwards, found out there was just heaps and heaps of oil under there. And Norway got quite rich off it. But you know what? I think that Denmark hasn't done so bad out of it because it kind of forced them to go all in on wind energy in a way that other countries kind of, it's like during the oil shock of, was it the 1970s, everyone looked into wind energy a lot, but as soon as the price went down again, then they were just like, oh, don't worry about wind energy. But Denmark just, kept on keeping on, and they did have, a few decades of just total world dominance in wind energy. And it also kind of, filtered through to other bits of the economy. It's really nice kind of, smart industry, manufacturing. They really did train up a whole generation or so of engineers that are, really industrious and innovative, and you see them in all sorts of other industries now. So I don't think that Denmark should have a chip on their shoulder about it. I think that, they should consider that they got some good out of it as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. The last funny I'll throw in there is, if you don't know this, Ørsted used to be known as Dong Energy, which is Danish oil and natural gas. So they used to be, that's not too long ago. That's only like 10, 12 years ago.
And I think it's the only example of any fossil fuel company that has flipped, like fully flipped to renewables. I don't think there's another example. Maybe, someone can email us and tell me I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're the only ones. And so that's why, I really, I'm always going for them, I'm always cheering them on. I want them to succeed because I want that to be something that can happen, so much better if oil and gas companies spend their energy transitioning to renewables and succeeding compared to if they spend their energy trying to, stymie the renewable energy transition. So, yeah, I think good for them.
And Orsted is saying no chance of any sort of merger with Equinor. In fact, their CFOs told analysts there are no merger plans, and the CEO of Orsted is also basically saying we're focused on our own plan. We're going to go ahead and get the company righted, and we don't really need a lot of Equinor involvement. That's going to come to a head pretty soon, though. If Ørsted can get their stock back up, like Joel has pointed out, the pressure from Equinor will slightly diminish over time. And if Ørsted can get really rolling, which analysts are saying now is somewhere in the 2030 region before they become self-sufficient in a sense, that until such time, Equinor probably is going to keep knocking on that door. It does lead to the question, and I think, Rosemary, you brought it up, probably 6 months ago or more, that Equinor is starting to pull back from its renewables business and starting to focus a little more on the oil and gas side. But they have renewable sort of requirements that they're going after, or goals, and that Ørsted could fulfill those goals. Is that still likely to be the situation where Equinor is going to be in oil and gas and Ørsted is going to be in renewables, and between the two of them, they satisfy both sides, Denmark and Norway's economic interests?
I think it's very, very hard, actually, for a company that's used to oil and gas projects to move on to renewables. I mean, they're not that similar. You might think it's one kind of energy moving to another kind of energy, but I think that totally misunderstands how the actual business works, what kinds of projects they do, how risky they are, how much return they require. And the only reason that companies would do that is if they were kind of forced to.
That's the ESG thing, yeah.
Well, it's not only ESG, though, because, I mean, Equinor, they are kind of running out, it started off with stuff in Norway or in Norway's waters, right? And they've, to a certain extent, run out of good projects. I mean, that always happens with fossil fuels, that, the good sites get depleted and you have to find new sites. That always happens. Aside from public pressure, legal pressure in some cases to not do this kind of extraction anymore, it is possible to run out of good sites and to think, okay, well, now renewables is starting to look a bit better.
Yeah, I think if you look at it this way too, make no mistake about it, Equinor is a major, right? In oil and gas, you have the two tiers at the top. You have super major, major. They're a major bumping against super major. They're active in, well, not in Australia anymore because they canceled that in 2020, right? But India, 4 or 5 different countries in Africa. They're in Brazil. They're in Argentina. They're in Guyana. They're in Canada. They're everywhere drilling for oil and gas.
Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, in the U.S. Yeah, so the UK, Norway. That's just one little part of it, right? They've been drilling in Africa for 40 years. They're a type of company, right? They're the same thing as a BP or a Shell or a Repsol, which have all said we're going into renewables. Wait a second, no, we're not. right? They're all kind of doing the same thing, pulling back out. But I think Equinor, that's their way of saying we are still a little bit environmentally conscious. We're still trying a little bit. Let's put some money in Orsted, because, like you said, it's just not their thing.
So when does it hit the national government level? Since now you have CEO for Equinor and Ørsted having opposing views in the press, and they're very vocal about it. This is not your typical Danish-Norwegian discussion where there's undertones and there's not a lot of quotes in the press. This is right out in the press, very open right at the moment. At what point do you see the Danish government and the Norwegian government coming together and maybe making some of the decisions for both sides?
Well, the Danish government owns 50.1% of Ørsted.
That's right.
And what's the company's named after a Danish physicist, right? It's like Hans Christian Ørsted or something, right?
No, I just want to say something that I don't know if I've ever said it on the podcast, but it's so funny because, okay, so Danish oil and natural gas, an acronym that's a bit weird because it's in English, but for a Danish company, dong isn't the best word in English. However, when what do we say, Ørsted? It's not like it's the crossed out O, and in Danish you should say that like Ørsted, right? It's got like the two hardest sounds to say, the and the D is, you say in Danish, you say the D with like your tongue and your lower teeth, like and if you like look like you're about to throw up, then you know that you're saying it right. So it's like they've gone from dong to Ørsted, and it's like, why didn't they pick a word that, like, if they want it to be an international, like a word that makes sense internationally, then why not pick a word that anybody other a Danish person can say? It's they're gonna have to do another rebrand.
Because Lego was taken.
Lego is a Danish word. It comes from legot, which means play well. So legot, from the two parts of the word. So that one, yeah, perfect. No notes. I did that really well. It's Danish, but it makes sense internationally. Well done. I don't know. Whoever came up with that, the Lego founder, needed to be involved in Dong's rebranding and have chosen something other than Ørsted.
We need to get someone on the podcast just to discuss that with us. Like, what happened here? Why? It has to be a Danish person that has some history with Ørsted, maybe.
The concept is cool. I like the concept. It annoys me because, you know, like I worked really hard at being able to say those Danish sounds in a way that meant Danish people could understand me. But now I'm supposed to say Ørsted, and that bothers me. So, you know, feel personally victimized by this name change, and they should do something about it for my personal preference.
As a person who was once the only American in a mainly Danish company, I got made fun of regularly for my inability to pronounce any Danish words.
Delamination and bond line failures in blades are difficult problems to detect early. These hidden issues can cost you millions in repairs and lost energy production. CIC NDT are specialists to detect these critical flaws before they become expensive burdens. Their non-destructive test technology penetrates deep into blade materials to find voids and cracks traditional inspections completely miss. CIC NDT maps every critical defect, delivers actionable reports, and provides support to get your blades back in service. So visit CICNDT.com because catching blade problems early will save you millions. Well, a Danish company is bringing wind turbine manufacturing jobs to, of all places, Colorado. Jupiter Bach, which is the Danish specialist in nacelles and spinner covers for a lot of the OEMs, announced it's opening a new assembly plant in Brighton, Colorado. And it will assemble nacelle covers, which are obviously, as we all know, the outer shells of wind turbines. Now, Joel, what's in Colorado? Who's making wind turbines in Colorado at the moment?
Vestas.
Envision has a big office there also. I don't think they manufacture there.
Right out of Boulder, I think. Didn't we do an article not too long ago about a tower manufacturer like in Pueblo?
Wasn't it CS?
Yeah, you're sitting on the I-25 corridor. So Brighton is actually on I-70, which is heading east off the I-25 corridor. But that I-25 corridor runs from Montana down into New Mexico, and everything branches off it. I-70 branches off it. I-80 branches off it, so that everything covers Like, to me, I've always said Denver, which is Brighton, is a suburb of an eastern suburb of Denver, is a great place for wind energy companies because you're a day drive from like 50,000 turbines. You're right there in the center of, you have good airports, you've got good transit, there's good rail there, there's good highways there. Um, and you have a workforce there, right? You're sitting outside of Denver. So I think it's a great spot. Happy to have Jupiter Bach joining or expanding there in Colorado. I think it's a good plan. Good move.
Well, we had their CEO, Andreas Kipker, on the podcast 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, and they were going to have a big expansion down in Florida. I think that still happened because they support a lot of the GE production down there in Pensacola. But I think this is the second plant. They have a facility up in around Schenectady, New York, also supporting GE's assemblies up there. So I guess this would be actually Factory 3 in the U.S. And this makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, in terms of avoiding tariffs and having to ship things from other places, that they're going to build it sort of next door to the OEM's manufacturing facility?
Yeah, let me ask you a question about that one because I don't know the answer to this. Everything we've talked about with the IRA bill basically getting canceled, one big beautiful bill, all this stuff. We've been talking about wind turbine development and construction and all this good jazz. However, as a part of that IRA bill, there was the ITC credits, the investment tax credits, that would go towards something like this. I don't have the answer to it. Do you think this still qualify or would qualify for some ITC tax credits for them to build manufacturing capabilities?
Just getting started, isn't that usually how this works? They're only going to have about 15 employees there when they get started, which makes me think the Pensacola facility has a lot of employees, and eventually they're going to get up to that level. But just planting your stake in the ground, I think, would qualify. That's how most of the IRA bill events happen. Like you got to start. Once you start, then it triggers more in the future. I would assume this is something similar.
Well, the ITC tax credits was like step one, right? But it was like 30% or something. Like if you build a new facility, we'll give you a 30% tax break on your capital spent to build that new facility. I wouldn't be surprised as well if the state of Colorado is not helping them out because they did a lot of things with Vestas and that tower manufacturing company when they were bringing them in. Like, hey, come and put an office in here. We'll give you blah 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 blah. Like much like most states will put a package together for big manufacturing things.
So that leads to a broader question because when I read the Jupiter Bach article the other day, I thought, oh, that's really interesting. There's some investment going on in the U.S. And overall, if you look at renewables in the United States, they are a good investment. That some of the renewable energy companies and some of the what I'll call secondary renewable energy companies that are associated are seeing valuations go up. And there's been a lot of sales most recently of wind farms and renewable assets in the United States. That leads to the question of, is it going to be like an underground, in a sense, an underground expansion of renewable energy in some of these low level, get the shovel in the ground to get ready for the push that's going to happen over the next couple of years? I see that happening. So even though the OEMs are still struggling a little bit and some of the large operators are realigning, there's still a lot of money being spread around. Joel, what was the acquisition that just happened?
CBRE bought Pierce Services for $1.2 billion. Now, that's a lot of money, but that's not just for their wind business, right? That is Pierce Services was into telecoms and all kinds of stuff. So, but that's 4,000 employees or whatever. But 1,000 of those, last I knew, 1,000 or so of those 4,000 people were in wind. So $1.2 billion is a hell of an acquisition for a service company.
Joel and I have been down to Pierce's training facility outside of Dallas, and it was new and massive and really impressive. And the amount of effort going into training new employees was going full bore. $1.2 billion, Joel and Yolanda, that's a lot of money to pay for that kind of company. You know what I mean? It does seem like that was a pretty penny. And there's a lot more activity I think we're not paying attention to just because it doesn't necessarily reach the level of national press where there's buying and selling happening in renewables.
Yeah, I mean, from sitting in my chair, which some days can be command central on the cell phone and on the laptop, there's a lot of M&A activity happening in wind right now, especially on the service side. You're seeing some companies that have used the last few years of a boom to grow in personnel, grow in revenue, sign contracts, all this great stuff. And then you're seeing some consolidation happening now of these companies getting brought into others trying to bolt on services, like, hey, we do service, but we'd like to have blades and we'd like to have construction or some cranes or whatever. So you're seeing people strategically bolt on because, and if you're a good company, your customers are asking you, right? Hey, I know you did our bore scope inspections, but can you do some blade inspections, or can you do this? Can you do that? Yeah. And then once that gets to a fever pitch, then what do? It's hard to find that person. And just here's an example, right? Blades. It's hard to find the person to run the blade company. It's hard to find the engineers to be the back end of the blade company. It's hard to find the technicians to staff the blade company. So what do? You just go buy one. Go find one that's got 30 people in it already and buy it. That's happening quite. There's a large handful of that happening.
And my concern about it is that because there's so much shuffling happening and money changing hands, I'm a little concerned about the 2026 blade season in the U.S. and actually globally. Yolanda, you're a little closer to that in terms of blade activity and repairs that are going on. What does 26 look like? Are there going to be fewer ISPs, and are they just going to be larger, or are there still going to be new entrants into the ISP world?
We've talked about the fact that nobody wants to be the guinea pig a lot of times, right? Nobody wants to be the guinea pig for these ISPs either. You get into the idea that some really great operators like EDF, where they can track the techs that are going on each team, and they have a way of mitigating the risk that way, right? But not everybody has done that, and not everybody has the capabilities to control exactly who has been on their site and who will be on their site aside from these particular companies, right? So as these companies grow, I think it'll definitely be having a lot more blade work going on and having to have these blades last a very long time. But I don't see a lot of new people coming into the market. I don't know if you guys have seen anything different.
So it's become a smokestack industry? Is that where we're going to go? It's going to be vertically integrated.
Well, I think what you have here as well is you may see. Okay, so let's separate it from field operations and business, right? So while you may see businesses changing hands, this, that, the other thing, one of the reasons that can happen is to be honest with you, in the field, if a site supervisor at a wind farm likes a certain team and a certain bunch of people, he doesn't care what logo comes at the top of the invoice. He, she, whatever it may be, right? So if this person, say Yolanda, runs a wind farm and she likes team 1, team 2, team 3 from company XYZ, if that company XYZ now is company ABC, Yolanda doesn't care anymore. She still wants team 1, team 2, and team 3. Okay, then you're in procurement now. Payments go to a different place. You're making money elsewhere. I don't care. I just want those technicians. So I think that you'll see some of that at our, the high level, looking in and going, oh, this company was bought by this company. This company's bought by this company. The MSAs go with usually when there's a purchase. And if the people like the people and the people are jumping around, they still are working with the same wind farms a lot. That's, I guess, my take from the field. Maybe, Yolanda, you have a different vision of that.
If you're growing the scope of this blade work, right, that you're having, because you want the blades to last as long as possible, you also have oftentimes you have a site that runs really lean internally, right? As the owner, as the operator, you don't want to have to manage a lot of different teams. So you mentioned team 1, team 2, team 3 coming in from company XYZ. If they can trust that company XYZ will get the job done, regardless of how many teams is on there, they'd rather have company XYZ than have company ABC and DEF and XYZ and having a lot of points of contacts that they have to come in and manage and add even more to their plate on top of their day-to-day operations, which is already so much for a lot of these site teams.
And I think that that's the advantage that you're seeing here of the consolidation, right? Oh, we're here on your site doing service. Well, now we're doing BOP, and now we can offer you blades, and now we can offer this. So now you got one company contact, and then we can take care of your stuff. And I think that's where a lot of these acquisitions are going.
Don't miss the UK Offshore Wind Supply Chain Spotlight 2025 in Edinburgh on December 11th. Over 550 delegates and 100 exhibitors will be at this game-changing event. Connect with decision makers, explore market-ready innovations, and secure the partnerships to accelerate your growth. Register now and take your place at the center of the UK's offshore wind future. Just visit supply-chain-spotlight.co.uk and register today. So if you haven't visited Australia, you need to visit Australia, and the perfect time to be in Australia is February 17th and 18th, because that's when we're holding the Wind Operation and Maintenance Australia event in, of all places, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Melbourne. It was terrible, right, Rosemary?
Yeah, we just went through this.
So the website is live for WOMA 2026. You can actually click the link, register now. It's $950 Australian, which is about, Joel, $700 US, which is the cheapest, most return for your investment conference in Australia. You're not going to find anything else anywhere near that price, with all the great content about how to operate and maintain your wind turbines in a really, really tough environment, which is Australia. What are some of the highlights, Rosemary, that we're going to see on February 17th and 18th of next year?
Well, we have got a few, because the event was quite successful last year and we're a bit more confident on numbers for this year, we have actually set aside some budget to bring some speakers from overseas on topics that I know that Australians struggle with. So one of them is bringing somebody to talk about contracts, because in Australia there's a lot of these full service agreements, and it really matters the wording of your contract. Like, just to give one example, what is a serial defect? For one person, it might mean 20% of your blades or towers or whatever have this defect within the first 5 years of operation. For somebody else, it might be 30% in 2 years. And so that really affects whether you're going to be able to claim for those kinds of things. So any number of little details like that we'll go through. And then who are the other international people we're bringing? Some people with experience, sort of operations experience with large fleets.
LEP.
Yeah, leading edge protection.
Yeah, we're talking to quite a few people that do run large fleets, and I'm talking large fleets like 8, 10, 15,000 turbines in one company. And the reason that we're doing that and trying to bring those people over is they have had personally a hand in the holistic management of specific engineering aspects of that, operations and maintenance wise. So blades, gearboxes, whatever it may be, they've looked at the problems, they've figured out a way to manage those problems for that massive size of a fleet. So coming to a place like Australia where there's 4,500, 5,000 turbines, that whole entire portfolio would fit inside their company. So they can really give some advice as, this is how we've done things, this is how what we've found, this is a good way to manage it, here's some of the tools we use, and we're really excited for that.
One other thing is kind of the opposite of that, is the really Australian specific part, because the longer that I work in this space on Australian projects, on a lot of maintenance and operations, mostly for me to do with wind turbine blades, I just see certain issues recurring over and over again that are really different to what happens overseas. So, it's to do with, leading edge erosion. It's a global problem, but these products fail differently in Australia than elsewhere. So, you do see, you want to sometimes you want to replace your leading edge protection after just 1 or 2 years, but then if you replace it with the incorrect product, you'll be doing it again in another year or two. And to be honest, I'm not totally certain that a really ideal product exists in that space. And then there's also some issues around with operating in high temperatures, the high UV lightning. We're getting some good lightning results from some of the sensors that have been installed around Australia recently, seeing that lightning is really different here. So many of those things. It's not purely about people talking about solutions. It's as much about understanding the problem properly, so that then solutions can develop that really suit Australia rather than suiting Europe or North America.
Absolutely. It's an exchange of ideas. It's an exchange of knowledge. It's not Danish, American, Europeans come to Australia to tell Australia what to do. It is an exchange. And I learned way more last year at this conference than I've learned in conferences in the U.S. over the last 3 or 4 years. It was incredible, just in a day and a half. And this conference will be about 2 days. It'll be at the Pullman Melbourne on the Park, a beautiful, beautiful city. The thing about February 17th and 18th, there's a lot going on in Australia. So if you want to attend this, you need to be thinking about getting your airline tickets settled right now.
I do want to touch on one other thing that's been a theme for us here as of late. Like Alan and I've been to a couple conferences in the last month or so and connecting with people. And one of the really important things that we loved about this event last year was the networking opportunities that we kind of built into it with coffee breaks and the cocktail hours and the whatever you want to call it. Very, very laid back, but the conversations that happen at those networking opportunities, that's where the real meat is, because the people that have the solutions and the problems are meeting each other and, swapping stories. And I don't know how many times I've just seen cards go back and forth or contact information and it's not a sales process. It's just like, hey, you got an issue, we can connect on it. Let's help. Let's do this. Let's do that. And that's really what we want to make this about, because as we always say on the kind of the Uptime podcast, is a rising waters floats all boats. So we're just here to help each other.
Amen. So please go to WOMA, WOMA 2026.com and get registered. There are only 250 seats and they are selling very quickly. So if you plan to attend, get on WOMA 2026.com and register today. That wraps up another episode of the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. Thanks for joining us as we explore the latest in wind energy technology and industry insights. If today's discussion sparked any questions or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's conversation, please leave us a review. It really helps other wind industry professionals discover the show. And we'll catch you here next week on the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast.